Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to yet another movie review and the second Captain Marvel review in a row. I am Chris, and I'm joined with Tay, and different title, obviously, but we are reviewing Shazam, which is DC's latest movie. In loose terms, the DC cinematic universe, which I'm not even sure if it's a thing at this point, and I don't even know if this movie thinks that's a thing at this point, but we'll get into that later on into the review. As always, we'll start off with spoiler free, and then we'll get into spoilers much later on. There's actually quite a lot I want to talk about in spoilers, which are kind of like a lot of references, and obviously the archetypal superhero post-credit scene. But again, like Captain Marvel in our review yesterday, this is going to be a very divisive review, I feel.
Yes, it is.
Which are always the fun ones.
I don't think as much as last time, because once again, I thought this was very middle of the road. I liked it, which is very unusual.
You cut out a little bit.
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
I was just saying this, to me at least, is a very middle of the road superhero film, but I know you actually quite like this one.
It's amazing how much of a breath of fresh air this superhero movie was, particularly to me. And I need to go on record and say I think I did a trailer reaction to the first trailer that came out for this thing, and then I don't think I bothered with the other ones. I hated the trailers. I was dreading this movie. I did not want to see this movie at all. I kind of fallen into a slump with movies as of late a little bit, and I was dreading seeing this at the cinema. As always, as people very much know on the channel at this point, I'm not the biggest DC movie fan post Man of Steel, well, including Man of Steel. I really enjoyed Wonder Woman, but that's really been the only movie that I've really connected with, and I was absolutely dreading this one. I will say as well, I wasn't familiar with the director at that point. I didn't look into the whole production of it, but this movie is directed by David F. Sandberg, who directed Lights Out, which was a horror movie based off a horror short film, I believe he put on YouTube, and also most recently Annabelle Creation. So a very weird director to choose to do a superhero movie, although there are quite a lot of horror elements in this movie. But I mean, I didn't know any of that going into it, so it was kind of a cold sit as well. I didn't know anything about the character of Shazam. Literally, the only thing I knew about Shazam was that Billy Batson was a kid, and when he shouted Shazam, he turned into an adult superhero. That was it. Everything else was completely new to me. So again, I don't know how much of this movie is comic book accurate. I think from what I've heard and what I've read, it is actually pretty accurate to the lore.
I've got possibly the cheesiest IMDb summary of the film up here.
Well, this is a cheesy movie, so that works.
So this is by far the cheesiest I've ever read. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
We all have a superhero inside us. It just takes a bit of magic to bring it out. In Billy Batson's case, by shouting one word, Shazam. This streetwise 14-year-old foster kid can turn into a grown-up superhero, Shazam. That is
so right there, that tone right there, just how you read that very whimsical. I mean, this is kind of a spoiler alert, I guess. It's a goddamn Christmas movie. I didn't expect that. This is a Christmas family movie. I've seen a lot of people compare.
I was really. Did they change the release date of this from Christmas? That's what I'm questioning.
No, I don't believe so. I'd have to read up about it.
Why are they bringing out a Christmas film in like March, April?
See, that would have made sense to switch Aquaman's release date with this one, because Aquaman came out December. This would have made more sense, but this is quite... I think Aquaman, they expected it to do well, mostly from the female demographic, because they like to see a shirtless Jason Momoa.
Permission to come on board.
Oh boy, that was all over the trailers, wasn't it? But this one, the movie feels much smaller. It almost feels like an independent movie in some points. And I mean, I just said it, but this movie felt like a complete breath of fresh air to me. And it reminded me of a simpler time. And Red Letter Media compared this to akin to like the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, which I can absolutely see that comparison. It is very cheesy. It knows exactly what it is. It gave me those superhero chills. There's moments in this movie which made me think like, yes, this is what I want to see in my superhero films. And I just came out of this film having a really, really goddamn good time with it. And that's exactly what Shazam is. If you'd have gone for like the classic Zack Snyder route of this movie and made everything drab and dark and depressing and brooding, and you tried to give some kind of, you know, make Shazam into something that it wasn't, this movie would have been an absolute tedious slog.
So and I've made a comment on this in the last video as well. I made a comment about 2 years ago saying superhero films are going to die out, just like westerns have. I now want to change that statement to superhero films are going to live the life of the Western hero life. So you started off with those really kind of early on cheesy Western films. So we're talking here like your Raimi trilogy, the original X-Men films, like that kind of tone taken with it. And then it's going to go darker for a period. And then it's going to brighten up towards the end of its life. And then you're going to get a film along the lines of Unforgiven, or you're going to get even like one of the modern ones that we've had recently, which is kind of tying in superhero films in the sense of Logan, which is a superhero Western film, I'd say. I feel like superhero films at the moment are going through that life, they're starting to go a little bit darker. We've seen it with the introduction of, well, really Marvel stepping up the game for everything else, and same with the Dark Knight trilogy. Dark Knight trilogy could be easily compared to the spaghetti western Fistful of Dollars, Few Dollars More, and Good, Bad, and the Ugly trilogy. You're at that stage now where a lot of people are making these kind of superhero films. And this one's almost like a step back. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm saying that in almost like a nostalgic way. It's very difficult to get nostalgia over something that is just over 10 years old, like the Raimi trilogy, which is why probably this didn't connect with me as much as it may have with you. I think that this was a good effort from DC, but I definitely don't think that it doesn't break the top two at the moment in my head for superhero films within DC. And if you're comparing it up against Marvel films, if I wanted to choose to watch this or Captain Marvel again, I'd probably watch this. But if I was looking at any of the other Marvel properties they've done in recent times, like Black Panther or Infinity War, or the films which we would consider to be good superhero films in these modern times, it wouldn't even compare even slightly. I have a lot to criticize on this film, but I also have a lot of good points to take away from it. So it ends up being a good effort and a good film that I'd recommend people watching. But at the same time, I don't think it should be heralded as, I mean, looking at the advertising they're putting up here, they're putting on the poster now that it's certified fresh, and they're putting, 10 out of 10, like people should go see this. It's not a 10 out of 10. It's a solid 7.5 out of 10, if that.
Yeah, so, no, I think I'd go about 7.5 or 8 or something like that. I just had a really good time with it. And to your point that you said that this movie felt like it was harkening back, you said it was very, what's the word I'm looking for? Nostalgic to like older superhero movies. We need to remember as well that, and I mean, I was getting like superhero chills in this movie. It was reminding me of elements of like the original Superman movie. And I was loving it for that fact. This is one of the earliest comic book characters ever created.
Yeah,
the character was originally created in 1939 as Captain Marvel with Billy Batson and everything. So that older style of comic book movie, in terms of its tone and its structure and everything like that, I very much appreciated. I appreciated this way more than most Marvel movies. Maybe not Infinity War. I'd have to go and see this a few more times than that. But I mean, this movie completely stands up on its own. You could argue that's because it's an origin movie.
Other than, I guess, I was just going to say, it's the first film they haven't had to reference other DC characters, but they do kind of reference them in there.
Well, here's the thing. This Shazam as a character in this movie exists in a world where Superman and Batman are a thing. So you could argue that it still does fit into the DC cinematic universe, but very, very loosely. You don't have to have seen all those previous movies to watch this movie. Essentially, you just need to know that Superman and Batman are a thing. And that's it. And there are elements with, this might be a spoiler, there are elements with Superman where they do get around some glaring issues of casting and things like that. But I appreciated that. It was nice to see this amalgamation of all these DC characters, you know, referenced sparingly here and there, but it felt like a solid standalone superhero movie. And that's why it was refreshing to me. With Marvel movies, you know, you kind of have to go in, if you go and see any of the Avengers movies now, you go in with a stipulation that you're having to have, you know, sit through 19 previous movies in order to make sense of this. A casual viewer can't go straight into Infinity War and understand who all the characters are.
But at the same time, you can go into a film like Captain Marvel and you can immediately know what's going on. That's where I think these two films are very similar. very, very similar, even in their original kind of names to the characters. But it's very interesting. These two films came out at almost the same time, and you're basically asking the question: do you want to go see a DC film, or do you want to go see a Marvel film? Because they're almost the same. They're origin stories. They take different approaches to the origin stories, and the characters are different, but the powers are very similar. And the way that it's laid out almost is just very intriguing that they brought them out at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And we have a similar cast member in the two as well. With,
yes, we do.
A guy's name that I always instantly recognize it, but goddamned if I'm going to try and pronounce his name. It's like Djimou, Djmou, I believe. He was in Captain Marvel and Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, I would say it's Jimon Hounzu.
That's it. There you go. There you go. They probably said it in an interview somewhere, and I haven't gone and done my research and checked that out. But he's in both movies, so you do have that connection there. And you also have a lot of actors in this movie, and I guess you're going to have crossovers now at this point, that have been in other DC properties. For example, you've got Mark Strong playing the villain, Dr. Savannah, Chivago, whatever his fucking name is, Dr. Savannah, I think it is.
Yeah.
Obviously, he played Sinestro in the Green Lantern movie, which is a movie that shall never ever be named ever again, unless it's in a Deadpool movie. And you've also got some side characters as well. Let me try and find the guy's name. I did have it on here. John Glover, who's an amazing character actor. He's been in stuff like Gremlins 2, for example, RoboCop 2. He was in Batman and Robin, and he's provided his voice for the Riddler in the animated series. He's been in a bunch of DC properties, so it was nice to see him as Dr. Savannah's father. Before we get on to the villain of this film, though, we need to talk about Shazam as a character himself with Billy Batson.
I was going to say, I got to give massive credit to 3 actors heavily in this film. Zachary Levi, he made the film fun. He made the film absolutely fun, and the entire sequences of him pretending to be almost like a child, just kind of learning the powers and stuff like that. Excellent. Love that. Asher Angel as Billy Batson himself, a solid performance from a young actor. Can't really fault him without the film. Really, really good performances, including one scene in particular, which was absolutely soul-crushing, which he acted perfectly throughout the entire thing. And also Jack Dylan Grazer as Freddy. Jesus Christ, he may have been my favorite character from the film.
He's like Fred. He's like a young Fred Savage.
Yeah, just absolutely a bundle of energy and a brilliant character to bring to the forefront. And yeah, can't wait to see if I'm assuming they're going to do a sequel. I'm just.
Yeah, it's been confirmed the last couple of days. I think they've seen how well it's done and how well it's gone over with critics that they're going to get on a sequel, which I'm really glad about. I look forward to it.
I can't wait to see him in the sequel, and if they do manage to get the entire Justice League to go, I just want to see his reactions to it and stuff like that, because his kind of superhero knowledge that he brings to the character, as well as his quips and his non-stop talking, is excellent.
A lot of kid actors, if anyone's seen the channel, you know that I can't stand kid actors in films. It's really, if you can get the right kid actor that, you know, can absolutely nail the part, then fair play, but it's very, very difficult to do. I thought the actors in this movie across the board were fantastic. I'll get on to Mark Strong in a minute. Not to say he was bad, but I'll get onto him in a minute. But my God, the two that you just mentioned, Asher Angel and what was it, Jack Dylan Grazer, they were phenomenal. You completely buy that friendship. Between them. Yeah, absolutely, completely. And it's that kind of. Now I'm going to get onto a possible negative in a minute, and I wanted to get your opinion, see if you had this as well. But that bond that they have, that friendship, it's very believable. And the way they talk, it's like that classic 80s movie kid film like The Goonies, where they talk like an adult. It's kids talking like adults, which I really appreciated. There's and some places that this movie went to which I didn't expect to. You've got you know, kids buying alcohol and like chugging beer, which is like something that I would never expect to see in a movie now in 2019. So there are a lot of elements like that that I appreciated. Asher Angel gives a very mature and, you know, emotional performance as well. There's a lot of stuff in this movie which I can't get into right now with spoilers, but involving his mom. And the movie goes places that I never expected a movie like this to go to, and to follow through with that, which I thought was incredible. Now, on the flip side, obviously, that's Billy Batson's incarnation, and when he shouts Shazam, he turns into Shazam, played by Zachary Levi, the adult superhero. Now, I didn't have a problem, but I can see why. I've heard some people mention this. I wanted to get your opinion on it. Zachary Levi plays the character, obviously as an adult, but still with a mindset of the younger version, Billy Batson. Do you think he played it too juvenile and too comedic, which wasn't akin to Asher Angel's portrayal of Billy Batson?
No, I think that is almost the ego of a child being put into that situation coming out. I think anyone in that situation would have done exactly the same. So I can't really fault that in any way. I think he played it perfectly. I genuinely think that there was maybe one or two scenes where the acting could have been a little bit better. But I think he fitted the role perfectly. As to what kind of that age of child would do if they were given those powers, if they're given that, they wouldn't immediately go to responsibility. No. They would test out the powers. They would basically just test everything out and just see how far they can push themselves with their own immaturity, I guess, because they're able to get away with it because they're an adult now.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't inherently agree with what I've just seen, that people have had that as a criticism, and it did make me think like, oh, maybe. I will say that Zachary Levi definitely does play it more childlike than maybe Asher plays it, but I can see what you're saying if you were gifted with those superpowers. And jumping off that, because I mean, whilst I did really enjoy this movie, the best stuff in this movie, hands down, is the very comedic stuff where it's this kid like trying, Shazam testing out his powers to see what he can do. That stuff was amazing, and it brought the house down in the cinema. This was a packed screening that I went to at the opening weekend that this film came out. But every time it did kind of snap back and it goes to your sort of typical, tropes of a superhero movie. Basically, every time it cut to Mark Strong doing something and being a villain, that's where I did kind of slump in my seat and go, this isn't bad, but I would like to get back to the fun shenanigans of Shazam.
Here's where I disliked the villain. I like the origin. I like the fact that he could have been Shazam and he's lusting for that power and he was tempted away by the 7 deadly sins. I know you say you like them. I hated the designs of the 7 deadly sins. I hated the character of the 7 deadly sins. I didn't like Mark Strong's character even slightly. And I think it was one of his weakest acting performances I've seen. And here is where I have a lot to criticize about the film. As far as the characters of the 7 deadly sins, they looked like really kind of weird CGI monsters, which I can go ahead and say now won't age well. There are loads of elements to this film which will age well, but that is one that give it. I'd say I've seen better CGI nowadays, and it's not exactly the prettiest kind of design of these monsters. So I wouldn't go as far to say that they're going to hold up very well. Not only that, but it's very difficult for me, at least in the screening, to distinguish between the designs of the monsters and to figure out which monster was which at what stage. I think the only one that I could figure out was Gluttony, because Gluttony had the mouth that opened in the stomach. All of the others, really difficult to distinguish. And I'd say pretty poor in the design of the fact that they're all trying to tempt these people in exactly the same way every single time. There isn't specific ways that each of these characters, because they should be called characters, because they should be characters. Instead, they end up being just, I don't know, sidecast or something like that. I just didn't think that they were threatening as monsters. I think Dr. Savannah himself was way more threatening than the monsters ever could have been with the power that he bestowed. And I just think that they kind of went a little bit cheap on that department of developing the villain and developing the monsters and actually getting them to be a threat.
Wow. Okay, see, we have a very different opinion here. To an extent, what I will say is that on the CGI front, I love the designs. I love the creature designs. To me, they were like straight out of Guillermo del Toro.
Guillermo del Toro, his monsters are way more practical. These ones felt CGI.
I mean, these were like wispy and smoke, and they could shapeshift and stuff like that. I didn't have a problem with them being CGI, and this is coming from a person who is an advocate of practical effects. And to your point that they don't have a character, when you've got Dr. Savannah, he should be at the focus. In this movie, and I don't know if the comic books are the same, the 7 Deadly Sins servers, hench people, they are essentially, primordial gods, essentially, who are so massive in their scope and complexity that they really don't need an identity of their own, because they are so threatening in their very being and their very scale.
At the same time, I would have liked to have seen some amount of development, something. I mean, just saying, oh, the villain is the seven deadly sins, and they've manifested in these weird CGI monsters. If they'd had actual personal attacks on people, like for example, Wrath had his own kind of personal attack that he went for. Envy had their own gluttony, and all of the other sins had their own uniqueness between them. Otherwise, they all look exactly the same. And it's not only difficult to distinguish between them, but it's very difficult to distinguish where the threat's coming from. Because if I'm going ahead and saying they all look the same, and I think, well, one of them isn't threatening, I don't think any of them are threatening. None of them stand out as being overly threatening. In fact, the only reason why they're threatening is because Dr. Zavana's there. If Dr. Zavana isn't there, they're not threatening at all. They're very easily beatable, in fact.
I completely agree with that. I mean, I did love the designs of the characters from the main ones that you see. I didn't have a problem with the CGI, and I don't really have a problem with the fact that they didn't have personalities or characters, because, I mean, Dr. Zavana should be at the focus. Then if you're throwing 7 other villains in there, that's damn near impossible to make them all have identities.
I don't want them to have identities. I just want them to be identifiable.
Yes, now that I agree with completely. Now, if I'm thinking about it, I think that Wrath is like this bulkier one, this muscular one. Sloth is easy to see. It's the fat one. It's the one fat one. And then there's one that's like a winged gargoyle.
Gluttony is the one fat one.
Gluttony, sorry, Gluttony is the fat one.
Sloth, I'm not sure which one.
And then this is the problem. The rest do kind of merge into and fall under one kind of general design. That I'll agree with. If they could have made them... I love the designs. I thought they were really creative, but if they could have made them more unique, so that at a glance you could tell them. Lust, I guess, was the one with the massive tongue that looked like venom, I'm guessing, but I don't know.
I can tell you now, from watching the film, they looked like someone had gone onto the Pokemon converter thing and put in Golem and Machamp on most of the characters.
No, I can see. So I did pick up that champ as well, with the one with the 4 arms. I think that was Wrath. I'm not sure. I'll completely agree with that. I did like the concept though, and I guess we're straying into spoiler territory now. But I think, well, hopefully, I mean, I don't know if JXC, if you've seen this movie, but I know that Brinsley, you have. So I guess we can talk about spoilers a little bit now. I liked the payoff that the 7 Deadly Sins had in terms of Dr. Zavana's character, in that he was Envy. JXC is talking about doing a Shazam 7 crossover as an edit. That would be a very, very interesting movie, I'm sure. But no, I liked that twist at the end. I thought that was very fitting for Dr. Zavana's character. However, now I need to talk about Dr. Zavana's character. I will say as well, another thing, I did think they were threatening in some scenes. There are some quite horrific scenes, which I really appreciate this movie going to. There are moments where demons are biting people's heads off, throwing people out of windows. That reminded me of Sam Raimi, and I think George mentioned this in the comments as well on our group chat. It reminded him of the hospital scene from Spider-Man 2, when the Dr. Octopus's arms are going crazy and just like completely wrecking everyone and everyone's screaming. It did remind me of that. Now, Mark Strong. I love Mark Strong. Mark Strong is one of my favorite actors. I think he's fantastic. However, he is kind of and I think I made this comment yesterday, alongside recently Ben Mendelsohn, he is kind of that go-to guy. It's like, we need a guy to play a villain. Just get Mark Strong, see if he's available. And to the point where this movie cast Mark Strong as Dr. Zavana shows to me how much they gave a shit about this villain. He doesn't turn in a bad performance. It's just, it feels like I've seen him play this character about 10 times.
It's not only that, but I feel like I've seen this kind of villain before. There wasn't anything unique about it, and maybe that's the one thing that I'm taking away from this film. This film was a good film, but it wasn't. It tried to be unique, but it wasn't unique enough in every single area to stand out. And I think, give it 3 or 4 years, this will be one of those films where people will be trying to name all of the DC films, and they'll go, and then there's Shazam, Shazam. It will be an afterthought of a film, and whether that's down to the fact that the villain wasn't convincing enough, and maybe they can fix that in the second film. But I just
See, here's the thing with the villain. I appreciate them. I don't even know if you could have given more substance to the villain. I don't know what it was. Maybe if you'd have if you'd have recast the villain and you'd have had the same role, but maybe someone who could bring a little bit more campiness or personality to the role, perhaps to make him stand out a little bit more, make him more quirky, maybe that would have worked. As it is, Mark Strong is a great actor, and his performance in this isn't bad, but it's just fairly flat. Now,
the way they wanted it was they wanted someone dead-faced so that they could have the kind of difference between the dead-faced villain and the really chirpy superhero.
Well, not just that, to the point, yes, but also I know that the arguably the biggest Shazam villain in the comic books is Black Adam, who has already been cast many years ago, I believe, as Dwayne Johnson, who has a producing credit on this movie, so he must have some affiliation like that with the movie as well. But since then, I know they were going to do a Black Adam standalone movie, and then I thought, well, what's the point of doing that when he is the villain of Shazam? Bring him into Shazam. Then I heard he was going to be in Justice League. Then he wasn't in Justice League. I think this movie is smart in casting Mark Strong as Dr. Sivana and having Dr. Sivana be the villain, because if you'd have just thrown Black Adam straight into this movie and Dwayne Johnson being the absolute star power that he is now, I think he would have completely overshadowed Zachary Levi in Shazam. And I think it was important for this movie as an origin film to fully establish and get the audience on board with Shazam before you can then bring Dwayne Johnson. And actually, having seen the tone of this movie now and how it's turned out, I absolutely think that Dwayne Johnson is perfect casting to be a villain, because you will have those very quirky, larger than life, charismatic characters offset with each other. And I think that could be very interesting when we get to whether that's going to be Shazam 2 or Shazam 3.
Yeah. Okay, should we go into spoilers?
I've got a few more. Yes, I've got a few. I'll do overall thoughts, though, because there's a few other things I wanted to talk about. One thing that actually SeaWorld Man's pointed out, the end of this movie does drag on quite considerably. That would probably be my only glaring negative with the movie, is that I think this movie is around 2 hours 15, 2 hours 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I think you could have easily, and I've seen this from a lot of people, you mentioned this, I think George mentioned this, and now SeaWorld Man, you could easily shave off about 10 to 15 minutes off the final fight. That really did start to drag on. He compared it to Man of Steel, and whilst I can agree with that in terms of its length, this didn't go, it doesn't have anywhere near as much collateral damage. You do see Shazam saving people, and there's even a shot in this movie where you do have Dr. Sivana and Shazam flying between skyscrapers, and it did directly remind me of Man of Steel, but there's no like pile driving people into skyscrapers and buildings crashing down and everything like that. The ending takes place in like a Christmas carnival. And just that in itself, this movie did remind me of like those classic 80s movies. I've seen a lot of people compare it to the superhero equivalent of Big, even to the point where the giant piano from Big features in this movie. I would even compare it more to the likes of Jingle All the Way, that kind of tone with Turbo Man, and it's set at Christmas and the carnival and everything. I was getting flashbacks of that, and a sort of disgruntled Santa features in both movies as well. I love this movie. I don't know whether this movie will have diminishing returns on a second viewing. And I was trying to think how I would rank this in terms of the current DC cinematic universe with Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, and Justice League. Now, at the moment, I think that I would still rank Wonder Woman slightly above this. But I was more entertained by this movie, if that makes any kind of sense at all. I think there was probably more substance and character in Wonder Woman, and I appreciated that a lot more. But I don't know. I'd have to go back and watch Wonder Woman. I don't.
For me, Wonder Woman got better on repeat viewings. Wonder Woman is still by far the best DC EU film. Then we come down to the fact that I quite liked Man of Steel. I liked the gritty edge that it gave. I liked the storytelling behind it. I liked almost the elements of calm nature that were thrown about throughout the film, and I will defend that final fight scene. I mean, I've watched it over and over again. He doesn't cause the damage. He's thrown into the damage by Zod. He doesn't try and save people because he's looking at the bigger picture here, and that's what Superman's always been about. So at least for me, I think Man of Steel I'd be still having at number 2 as a better shot film and a film which I connect with a little bit more. Then I'd probably put this film, and then, I mean, it's an absolute mosh pit to get to the basement of all the other films. Jesus Christ. I would honestly say, just because it wasn't that bad, Aquaman is literally holding down the seal of the basement, and everything else is literally a straight drop into hell.
the rest of the DC cinematic universe is like that shot from Aquaman where they descend into
Yeah.
all those like horrific creatures like roaring away at them.
I'd say that Aquaman was only just above that basement line. It's
and then Pitbull's rendition of Toto's Africa came on, and then you just wanted to open your veins in the middle of the cinema, right? At least I did.
Oh my
Some
God.
people walked out.
I'm not sure. I mean, sadly, I wasn't able to see it in cinema. But if I did, I'm pretty sure I would have walked out at that stage. The fact that I was kind of just so confused by that one scene. I was like, why are they doing this? Why?
But this is the difference with this movie, and I think that, I mean, I hated Aquaman. I can't remember which number I put it. I think I put it as like my fifth or fourth worst movie of last year. Like, I hated Aquaman, but you can see that was a small step in the right direction into like brightening the tone a little bit of their movies. I still found Aquaman just like really poorly written and bad characterization across the board and unfocused as a movie. But this one, I was grinning ear to ear, like beginning to end with this movie. It was so nice to come out of a DC movie not feeling like 9/11's just happened. Like, you know, it was nice to go and see a superhero movie, a family movie, just have fun, smile, have a good time. The credits hit and I'm smiling and I can't wait for the next one. And that was so refreshing to me with these movies. Now, if DC can maintain this now, not to say that the Joker movie needs to be exactly the same tone as this, like obviously change the tone of your movie depending on the character. And I'm loving what I'm seeing from the trailer of Joker. But maybe if they do just take a step back and maybe this is their new plan. I don't know what their plan is at the moment. You've got Wonder Woman 1984 coming out. You've got Suicide Squad 2, but with a new director and some recastings here and there. For all intents and purposes, that might even be a soft reboot of the Suicide Squad movies. If DC can focus on these solid standalone movies, maybe that's the future. Like, I don't know how long the Marvel Cinematic Universe can keep going with all of its connected movies before it like cripples in itself. Maybe DC have got the better idea now of going, you know what, we're not going to try and chase Marvel and create this cinematic universe with our characters. We're going to have vague references here and there, but we're just going to put out solid standalone movies. How superhero movies used to be in the back in the days of like X-Men or Spider-Man or things like that, when things used to be simpler and you could just go and watch a Shazam movie, not having seen 20 other movies before it. Maybe that's the future. I don't know. We'll have to see. I really hope that Joker's good though. And, you know, DC has 2 solid movies under their belt with an understanding of the character, because that's primarily my biggest praise of this movie. It completely understood the character, its tone, it knew what it wanted to be, and it went and did it, and it was an entertaining movie. I would definitely recommend this movie to anyone, even if you're unsure, because, I mean, I was the biggest
I've given it some criticisms, but I still recommend seeing it.
Yeah.
So,
but spoilers? I think, yes, let's get into spoilers now. So I think a lot of people in the comments don't really care about us spoiling this movie anyway.
Yeah.
And I don't have loads of stuff to say. It's kind of, I've already hinted at it at the moment, but there are some references obviously to the greater DC stuff and not just DC stuff. I noticed a lot of references that the Annabelle doll features in the movie in the background in a toy store at one scene.
Really? Huh?
In the scene where Billy locks towards the beginning of the movie where he locks the police guys in. If you look in the bottom left of the screen, you can see the Annabelle doll. Now, at first, I thought that was because, obviously, we've got The Curse of La Llorona coming out. We've got an Annabelle movie, as well as Conjuring 3 coming out. And I thought, you know, both are owned by Warner Brothers. It's just a reference there. And then I found out that David F. Sandberg directed Annabelle Creation. So I'm expecting that's the reason why that's in there. And also a reference to It, I noticed as well. This might be a bit more vague, but obviously Jack Dylan Grazer is in the recent It movie that came out. And also at the end when all the kids are like armed with like kids weapons, like a slingshot and like a plastic gun, going into like this dark basement to take on this evil corporeal form, that really reminded me of It as well. And also the fact that it's owned by Warner Brothers and New Line Cinema, which this movie is produced by. So they're the 2 references I noticed in that regard.
There is one kind of spoilery thing, in fact 2 scenes that I want to go over. To start off with, we'll start with the more lighthearted one, and we look towards the future of DC and where they go from it. I would like to know, are they going to continue, now that all of the kids have the Shazam power, does that basically mean that in the next Shazam film, it's going to be 5 people fighting one, or is it going to be that some of them use the powers every now and then, or some of them, or are they just going to ignore the fact that the crippled dude now has the ability to walk if he uses this power, so he's never going to stop using the power?
See, I mean, that depends where they go with the sequel in terms of the villain. Now, I expected naturally it to be Black Adam, but we don't really get a reference to Black Adam. The villain that we do get a reference to in the post-credit scene, and I didn't know anything about this. As soon as that post-credit scene ended and I watched it, I said exactly what I said back in 2012 when I didn't know who Thanos was. That means something to someone. And of course, I think we did this with Guardians of the Galaxy 2 as well with Adam Warlock. We go straight onto Wikipedia, we go straight onto Google and go, what the hell was that post-credit scene about? So what it is a sentient evil caterpillar-like creature called Mr. Mind, who is the head of an evil society of monsters called the Monster Society of Evil.
Nice.
So I'm assuming that he's going to be the villain alongside these guys. And I mean, if it is a squad of people, I think it's like 3 crocodile. I think they're called the Crocodile Men or something like that. And I think there's 3 of them. So if you are having this fact how you've got this caterpillar who's sort of like the evil mastermind, and then you've got 3 henchmen, it's going to be very similar to Mark Strong with the 7 Deadly Sins, but on a smaller scale. So therefore, you might get more of a personality with the villains. And also, it will make sense for Shazam to have his team of people go up against these people. So I could absolutely imagine that. Or maybe they get their powers taken away somehow. I don't know. Talking about the kids getting the powers, though, I was really reminded of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers towards the end, how they have all their unique colors, but I really liked that. One problem that I did have, and I actually did like the Foster family, actually. I did like all the kids. However, there's one kid in particular that I don't feel earned that transformation. It goes back to like an identity thing. So obviously you've got the little girl who was really sweet, and you know she was saying she wanted to be a good sister and everything like that. I completely buy her. You immediately know who she is out of the lineup. You've got the crippled kid who could now fly. They essentially get a power that they didn't have as a kid. The last one was this, you know, fairly overweight kid who was very silent. He didn't say much. And I'm assuming at the end he's the one in green with the beard who's got like big biceps and he's like he's like checking himself out and everything like that. I think that would have had more of a point because he didn't really get much of an identity. As I said, he doesn't say anything in the movie. I think he says like one line. If earlier in the movie, like because he's overweight, maybe he's looking at himself in the mirror, and maybe he's like looking at his arms or his body, and he's not happy.
He has a very brief reference to it by saying his weights were all over the place and stuff like that.
Oh, did they say that?
Yeah, his weights were sitting on the Welcome Home poster, and then it ripped the Welcome Home poster.
Oh, okay. See,
so that is a very, very slight reference.
It's vague. If you had him like sitting on his bed and he's like trying to do some bicep curls and he's just unhappy with his body and you know he's overweight, he's not in shape, and then when you do get that transformation and he's checking himself out, you go, oh, okay, that's that kid. Just little things like that I think could have been added into the movie, but again, I don't. If you poured all that characterization into these side characters, whether it's the 7 Deadly Sins or the kids, you're taking away from what the central thing is.
Finally, the one last scene I want to talk about is my favorite scene from the film, which is the story of him finding his mum and him coming face to face with his mum and finding out that he had basically been abandoned by her and she wasn't looking. And that was just a perfectly acted scene from both actors involved. Really, really brought it through and just kind of showed how he didn't need that mum, but he might need this family now. And that kind of brings that character almost to a full circle within their childhood of always having to search, always being on the run. As soon as he finds his mum, she doesn't want him still. And I think him passing on the compass thing and her going, what is this? And her not even knowing how significant that was to him and what a big thing that was to him, that the compass would always guide him home. And yet at the same time, that's how it was. I think that was very well done. Very, very well done.
And you don't see many superhero movies go in that route. Either they just kill off the parent or kill off the uncle or whatever it happens to be, and that's it. But no, I thought, and again, I don't know if this is like the origin story as it came out in 1939. Obviously, I'm assuming it's a character that now we're in 2019 has gone through many different changes and many different adaptations. So I don't know if that's the case, but yeah, the mom's like complete and utter like white trash America, isn't she? There's no redeeming quality to this woman at all. And as I was watching the movie, like subconsciously, I kept thinking, like, why wouldn't she have found him? Like, this is a very easy, simple fix. Like, I don't know how she wouldn't have found him. And then obviously it all makes sense later on in the movie. I thought that was a beautiful point and a nice tipping point for the character. I like as well with the character, going back to Sam Raimi's Spider-Man as well, that Shazam getting his powers is an act of him almost becoming his own villain. In an act of carelessness. With Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, you've got the fact that he goes on a quest for vengeance, essentially, against the one who killed his uncle. He almost goes to push him out of a window before the criminal falls out himself, and he lets the criminal go. His uncle gets killed, and then from that, then he becomes a hero and realizes the error of his ways and what he could step into. With Shazam, you've got his act of arrogance at the top of the rocky stairs. Zapping lightning to Eye of the Tiger and accidentally hitting a bus. I really liked that we had another bus crash as well. It did remind me of classic Superman, that iconic image of like lifting a bus or whatever it happens to be over the head. I did like that. But no, I mean, this movie did go in a lot of places that I really appreciated a superhero movie going. It hit all the beats for me. I don't really have any other spoiler things to say. I guess for a sequel, I'll say that and going back to your point of how you don't know if all the kids are going to continue to have these powers, and I was chatting about this in the comment section. We don't know if that power was permanent to the kids, and also Shazam does snap the staff after that, and I believe that they all have to touch the staff, don't they, and say Shazam. So maybe they won't have those powers anymore. Maybe it was.
I think as soon as you get the power, it's shared between them. They all have their different personalities. I'm pretty sure that in the original Shazam, it was 3 people or something like that, or one of the incarnations, there was multiple Shazam people who could say the word and kind of join forces. But he has the original power, and I think the other people don't have all the powers. They just have the powers that are split. So one of them will have super speed, one of them will have flight, one of them will have super strength and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's how it works out in the next film, that it's the one main Shazam that has all the powers, and then the almost sidekick family. But saying that, if we're talking about ones which won't be back for the next film, I highly doubt that the oldest will be back for the next film, seeing as she's going off to California. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's an area where they can come up.
Well, no, because she said she wanted to stay, didn't she?
Spin-off. Who knows? If she does go in the end, that could be an area where they could do a TV spin-off with DC or something like that. Who knows?
She goes off to college. And it's a college sitcom.
But they were saying that I read this somewhere that someone suggested that it'd be good to see the character's age for the next one. And you've got high school, like middle school for this one. Be good to see the kids like actually growing up, high school or college, or something a little bit older, a little bit more mature, dealing with different issues for the different films.
Well, this is the thing, like with a sequel, you've kind of played that shtick now that Shazam is a kid in an adult's body, like a fish out of water kind of thing. You've played that out now. But to me, that is an integral part of the character.
Maybe having him starting to catch up to that almost not age of Shazam, but kind of the maturity that's heading that way. Maybe possibly being set back by him still being attached to the fact that he was a kid when he first transformed and not growing with the character could be a thing. And his immaturity showing out, even though everyone else is growing up with their own character roles.
Yeah.
That could be something.
There's a lot of places this could go to, and I never thought that I would say that of all movies, Shazam would be the movie to turn it all around for me. I am now very much looking forward to Shazam 2, Shazam 3. Yeah. I hope it does get a trilogy, and I think it could be solid if they do have a plan for it. And just focus on the standalone stuff. Like, don't connect it. You don't need to. There's like barely any references in this. You've got like occasional Superman. Superman gets a cameo at the very end of the movie in the loosest possible term possible. Yeah. They very nicely dance around that Henry Cavill issue by cropping him from the neck down, so you don't see his face. They play the John Williams Superman fanfare, which I really thought was kind of fun. and that's it. Yeah. So no, if I'm going to go into my overall recommendation, I had a solid time with this movie. It was a breath of fresh air superhero film for me. It harkened back to the old school superhero films, which I thought was very necessary. Great origin story, solid script, great acting, worked in perfect synergy with each other. And yeah, I would highly recommend this movie. But I know that you have your reservations.
No, I'd recommend it as well. I'm just saying that it's a very middle of the road superhero film. It's very average. It's got some good points, it's got some bad points. They balance themselves out. It's one of the best films that DC has made, but that doesn't really stand for much when it doesn't even compare to anything from, I'd say, previous DC films. So like you're looking at the Nolan trilogy, even the older Batman films from the 80s and 90s. And then you're looking also at Marvel with what they've done recently with cinema. Sure, there are loads of films which chuck into the Marvel machine, but they seem to pull out those big films, at least one a year, which seems to do extremely well and seems to be very good, which would easily go up against this film and smack it out the water. So it's difficult. I'd recommend you seeing it, but yeah.
I think that DC, I mean, DC have got 2 movies out this year, haven't they, with Shazam and Joker October.
Yeah.
I don't believe they have another one, whereas Marvel are still cranking out 3 a year, I think, with Captain Marvel. We've got Avengers Endgame, and then it's Spider-Man Far From Home in July, is it? Have we got one in November as well, or is that it this year? Just the 3?
I'm not quite sure.
I think it's 3. But yeah, DC, take your time. Establish your characters. You're doing a good job. You've had a solid movie now. Let's just keep that up. So that'll do it for our review on Shazam. Be sure to comment, subscribe, let us know what you thought of this movie. If you haven't done so already, thank you to Brinsley, Seawood Man, and JXE in the comments. You guys are absolute troopers, jumping on every review that we do. In terms of upcoming movie reviews, I need to stop being lazy and get my ass to the cinema to see Dumbo, Us, and Pet Sematary. So I still need to see 3 big movies. Hopefully I can get to those movies and they're not at bad times. The reactions will be returning probably this evening, if I have enough time. I'm hoping so. There's a new Lion King trailer that's literally just gone up as we went live on this review. So that's going to be in the usual format. And then also I want to do a reaction to the Addams Family animated film. The official trailer came out yesterday, and I might try that out as a live reaction to see which people prefer, and then we'll go from there. We've got Game of Thrones next week. We'll be starting weekly reviews on the Game of Thrones episodes. And yeah, there are loads more movies coming out now, and we're getting back into the swing of things. We're back on it. So please hit that subscribe button. And until the next video, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.